management isn't love. It really isn't, even if we think we're being driven by love. Our husbands don't want to be managed. Our grown children don't want to be managed. And even our minor children want a certain amount of respect. Listen to them. Ask a question and then be quiet. All right, well, I think about that differently. You can have a differing opinion. But what I find is that the desire, when you fall into this category of being a high-functioning codependent, it's like we're really driven by our fear, which is different than being driven by love.
Have you ever found yourself trying to fix someone else's problems, even when they didn't ask for help, or constantly anticipating everyone else's needs to keep them happy at the cost of your own well-being? Honestly, it feels like I'm describing myself here. And if any of this sounds familiar, like you or someone you know, you might be dealing with high-functioning codependency, a behavior pattern that's often hiding in plain sight. Unlike traditional codependency, high-functioning codependency can look like you're simply being helpful, but really, it's a compulsion to manage outcomes and overfunction for others, leaving yourself and your own needs behind. So what can you do to stop being a high-functioning codependent? Well, today I'm joined by Terri Cole, a true powerhouse in the world of relationships and self-empowerment, who's about to break down all of this for us and give us tools to break the cycle of high-functioning codependency. Terri is a licensed psychotherapist, a global expert on relationships, and the author of 2 books, Boundary Boss and her brand new book that came out today, Too Much, a guide to breaking the cycle of high-functioning codependency. Terri has a gift for making complex psychological concepts easy to understand and apply, inspiring over 1 million people each week through her blog, her social media, signature courses, and her podcast, The Terri Cole Show. In today's conversation, Terri and I break down what makes high-functioning codependency so unique, how it differs from traditional codependency, and how to recognize and break free from the cycle of over-investing in other people. Because ultimately, healthy relationships are the key to mental peace and the key to all aspects of health. I'm so happy to share my conversation with Terri Cole about how to break the cycle of high-functioning codependency. I'm Dr. Avanti, and this is The Healing Catalyst. Hello, my friend Terri. I am so happy to see you. It's been a while since we've been together.
It sure has. So good to see you too.
It's so good to see you. And I am super excited to talk to you about your brand new book coming out. And I want to jump into all things about this topic about codependency, but specifically, you actually wrote the entire book about high-functioning codependency. So let's start with that. What does that actually mean, high-functioning codependency?
Well, let's break down the definition of codependency according to me. It's you being overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the decisions, the relationships of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace, of your own maybe financial well-being, psychological well-being, spiritual well-being. Because here's the thing, obviously, we're moms, right? We're sisters, we're lovers. Obviously, we're going to be invested in the happiness of the people we love. This is being a woman. I mean, this is just the way we do it. But codependency means we're overly invested in those things to the detriment of ourselves. So that's where we know there's an imbalance. The reason I coined the phrase high-functioning codependency is that my clients, very capable, high-functioning women in particular, when I would say, oh, hey, what you're describing is a codependent pattern, they'd be like, yeah, no, lady, not me. You're thinking of someone else because I'm not dependent on squat. Everyone's dependent on me. I'm making all the dough. I'm making all the decisions. I'm the rock in my family of origin. Everyone comes to me, so I can't be codependent. And what I realized is that my clients didn't understand what codependency was. They didn't identify with the Melody Beatty, codependent no more, got to be involved with an addict, enabling an alcoholic type of codependency. They're like, that's not me. I'm like, that's not all of what codependency is, although that is codependency. So with high functioning, the irony is that the more capable you are, the less codependency looks like codependency, even though it still is codependency. And you're still, the damage that happens to us from being overly invested in the feeling states, decisions, outcomes, relationships with the people in our life is real. And I also see differences, right? I see differences. With high functioning codependency, it's almost like there's one aspect of our lives. Yes, we're kind of doing everything for everyone. We're kind of the go-to person. We are highly, many of my clients and myself too, and you as well, we're highly successful. We know what we're doing. We are ambitious, but we are, again, with that overly invested. And there's a macro and a micro of this, where what I see in my therapy clients and in myself is that we're a little bit codependent with the world. It's not just relegated to the people in our lives. I literally opened the book with a story about me being 21 maybe, and it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm taking a train from Long Island back to New York City. And there's like a 19-year-old kid who's also getting on the train. So I start talking to him and I'm like, where are you going? He's like, I had a job. I was supposed to be driving a car from Long Island back to Indiana, but then it got canceled. So I go, so where are you going at 11 o'clock at night? Who the hell am I? I'm only 21. This kid's 19. Then he's like, going to Penn Station. I'm going to sleep in Penn Station. And I was like, no, you're not, Billy. Even though I just met him, I was like, that is so dangerous. Keep in mind, it was the late 80s. It was dangerous. And I was like, you'll listen, you could come to my house. I took a complete stranger home to my apartment. I had a roommate, didn't even ask her. And she was like, well, obviously you couldn't let him sleep in Penn Station. I was like, correct. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And listen, maybe you or people listening or watching have never gone to the extreme that I did with Billy, but we all have the ways that we have been inappropriately sucked into the lives, problems, issues of others, whether it's extended family or whether it's a total stranger. I could be codependent with like my hair colorist. You know what I mean? Like it really didn't just have to be someone, didn't have to be just my sisters. And what I found is that it wasn't just me. And when I added high functioning to the term codependency, all my clients were like, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
That's what I'm doing. I am totally raising my hand as you're saying this. I'm like, high functioning. Okay, so let's backtrack for a second, because there's so many pieces of gold in what you just said to us. I got to try and recount it. So the first thing is that this idea of being codependent in the world, right? Or codependent with the world at large. So when you were talking about this example of being on the boat going back to Long Island and talking to Billy and then asking him, where are you going? And why don't you come stay at my place since you were going to sleep in the station? Where is the line between that being sort of a way to help other people and being sort of in that helping role that, me and you both are in the helping professional. We know those roles very well, versus codependency. So wouldn't that just be being kind to somebody who's down on their luck?
No, because there is many ways. Like, and I break this down in the book where I could have been like, hey, I know a youth hostel that's inexpensive and here's $10 or whatever, right? It was the 80s. He probably could have stayed at the youth hostel for $10. Or I could have said, my opinion, you didn't ask for it, but is that it's dangerous. And I wouldn't. You'd be better off sleeping in this station in Long Island than you would be going there, right? Or I could have just minded my own damn business, right? This kid wasn't here crying and being like, help. I literally like beat the information out of him and then decided what he was going to do.
Right.
Because let's make the distinction of why.
Yes.
Right. Why? Because part of being a high functioning codependent is feeling overly responsible for all situations. We feel like, the mantra for an HFC, as we call it, is it has to be me. We think it has to be us for a lot of reasons. One reason, a lot of times, is because we don't trust other people to do it.
Right.
We don't trust other people to do the thing, or to do the right thing, or to do the thing we think is the right thing, or to do the right thing the way we think it should be done.
Right.
So now, you've
Yeah.
got this perfectionism and this super high standards a lot of times.
Sure.
And people just get tired of like doing it wrong too. People are just like,
Right.
just forget it. She's going to redo it, or she's going to. So I think that there's a lot of, I know that there's a lot of elements to having the experience of high functioning codependency. But what I think is important is for us to understand the cost, right? Now that was a dangerous thing that I did. I was young. It was the 80s. I didn't know, right? You shouldn't bring a stranger home without asking your roommate if it's okay.
Right.
You probably shouldn't just bring a stranger home. Like, that's probably just not smart.
Right.
And so there's that aspect of it, but there's more than that, because, and I give many examples throughout the book, case studies from clients, and then my own, so many, because I was such a high functioning codependent for so long, and not realizing that my exhaustion and my burnout and my feeling that all of these people are so entitled, taking advantage of me, of my kindness, of my generosity, all this expectation from other people. And what I really came to in my own therapeutic process was that obviously the common denominator in all of those experiences was me. And that, was it really that people had this massive expectation of me, or was it that I had this expectation and I was now projecting it onto them as if they expected it from me? I was serving myself up on a silver platter of overfunctioning and overgiving and overfeeling and overdoing and being overly responsible, and then being like, why can't that person just get it together? Well, why is it your responsibility that they don't have it together, Terri? That's not your side of the street. But it took years of therapy for me to see that. And then Avanti, I saw the same patterns in my therapy clients over and over again. And so the reason I came up with this phrase is because it actually is a different phenomenon than your regular run-of-the-mill codependency. But I also couldn't help my clients if they couldn't see themselves in the problem. It was obscuring my ability to help them get to the solution, because they were like, no, that's about someone else. I'm like, no, this is about you. Because when you think about the really, and I think that even with just regular codependency, we don't talk about this aspect of it enough, is that it is a covert or overt bid to control other people's outcomes.
Yes, to all of that. And so let's go back to what, you just said, is that there's a difference between regular codependency and high functioning codependency. And I get that, that term high functioning is so that people could see themselves. They don't put that wall up of like, yeah, that's not me. I'm not codependent, right? I don't have to depend on anybody, like you're saying. What is the difference then between, let's start there, because I think it's important to understand what is codependency in the first place. And then let's go to high functioning, the difference maybe.
Well, I think with codependency, they're both being overly invested in the feeling states and outcomes of others, right? This is where the similarities are. A lot of times with the codependency that we're all very familiar with, there is an enabling aspect to it. It may be with someone who has an addiction issue. With high functioning, it doesn't have to be that. They just may not be functioning to the level we think they should be, or they may not be doing what we want them to be doing. So right there, we really are talking about differences. And I think that the high functioning moniker is so that it really is like a dog whistle, so that people can see themselves in this exhausting behavior. The similarities is that it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be in codependent relationships because we're trying to do what we cannot do, right? Someone, if you're codependently in a relationship with someone who has an addiction issue, and you are throwing money at the problem and you are covering up for them, your adult son or daughter who doesn't go to work because they're hungover, but you cover for them, right? You're trying to stop the inevitable because you're endlessly trying to protect them from the consequences of their situation, their choices, their addiction, whatever it may be. This is a little bit different because there's more of an overt control aspect with high functioning, because a lot of times we're not talking about dealing with people who are addicted, right? We're talking about dealing with people who are really fine, except not doing what we think they should be doing. So there is a massive control element to high functioning codependency.
Okay. Yeah. That's really, I think that's so key. I want to tap into what you just said, the overt versus the covert, right? In sort of this codependency pattern is that sort of what all of us, and even me as I'm sitting here talking to you, when you say codependent, I'm like, yeah, that's not me. I like a wall goes up. I'm like, yeah, not me.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Right. Because it's that covert of,
Yep.
I'm going to be hiding something or covering up for somebody but then as soon as you say overt, that it's that expectation that someone should be doing something the way I want to, I'm like, oh shit, that's me. I'm the problem.
Right.
It's
and especially
me.
with kids, forget it. Like,
oh yeah.
Without a doubt. Other ways of identifying yourself as a high-functioning codependent, let's say with the world, right? There's a phrase that I coined called auto-accommodating, where how I discovered this, I was doing it all of my life. There was no name for it, but I was doing it. It's how I was interacting with the world. You see a problem, you want to be a part of the solution. I don't care. I'm sitting on a plane, two people want to sit together. I can be like, I'll move. I don't mind, right? Like, so I was sitting there at my hair salon in the city, and I had a mask on my hair, and it was busy as hell. It was a Saturday. I'm not usually there on Saturday. So there was a line for the sink. And now I could be meditating. I could be listening to a podcast while I'm laying there for 10 minutes. But instead, I'm getting really anxious because the line is getting long. And why am I taking a seat when I could be sitting somewhere else and someone else could be using the... This is literally what I'm thinking. I'm worried about the sink flow at my hair salon. So you're the girl. Hey, I can move, and she's like, yeah, lady, we're good. We got it, whatever. And I realized as I was laying there, like, wow, this is a compulsion. You are so dialed into what's around you. You are so looking for, is there a problem that I need to fix? Is everything okay? There's a hypervigilance that comes with certain ways of being high functioning codependent, but that was just one. And then I started sharing, then I wrote about it, and it went viral. So it had like 120,000 downloads in 28 days. It was literally just this concept that came to me. I was like, wow, I've had 30 years of therapy. I feel like I'm on the other side, because I feel like with high functioning codependency, we never talk about being cured. We only talk about being in recovery, because it's very similar to anything else. Like, this is still my nature, right? I just don't act on these things, right? I just don't, I'm well aware. I can give myself grace. I don't have to stop listening to my podcast to manage some shit that is not mine to manage,
Right.
which is so much of what we're doing when we're in HFC.
Yeah.
We feel like we are the manager of the world and all situations.
Right.
And the cost, because here's the thing, because people will say to me all the time, Amaji, so what's wrong with being nice?
Right.
What's wrong with being a part of the solution? What's wrong? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I'm like, if it's a compulsion, if you can't not do it, that's not being nice. That's being driven. That's a compulsion to control your environment. It's not the same thing. And what is lost? Because that's the real thing. What is lost in our relationships? What is lost in our interactions in the world? What is lost in our relationships? So now let's bring this same auto vibe to our relationships. I find with HFCs, there is this auto advice giving action that happens where someone is talking about a problem and we immediately have the solution. We have 17 solutions, not just one. If they reject that one, there's so many more.
Right.
Your grade A advice giving just never ends. We just keep going. So again, now people will say, I get pushback on this online. What's wrong with telling someone what I think? Well, First of all, it's centering that other person's problem on you. So start there. It doesn't mean we never give our loved ones our opinion on something. My point, and what I teach you in the book, is it just doesn't have to be the first stop on the train. Why can't we say to our adult child, what does your gut say? What do you think you should do? Because your instincts are great. And
Right.
I really respect your instincts. So if you did know, what do you think it would be? And let's
Right.
just spitball it. Just tell me anything that's coming to your mind right now, right? We learn how to ask expansive questions. And what we learn there is we deepen the intimacy in our relationships when we stop friggin' bossing everybody around and thinking we know the answer. Because here's the thing. My mother had this saying on her refrigerator growing up. I think it was an Irma Bombeck quote. And it says, I promise not to take credit for your accomplishments if you promise not to blame me for your failures.
Oh.
And when you think about what parenting is, yeah. I was like, I'll take that deal any day.
Yes.
I'll take that deal any day.
Yes.
Right? Because the difference between, like when we give people advice in an automatic way, when we are the auto fixer, the auto advice giver, we're driven by our fear of that adult child or our best friend or our sister making a mistake, doing something to ruin their life, doing something to cause themselves pain or cause our parents pain or whatever our fear is, right? But what we don't realize when we're doing that is that that is not your side of the street. Even if your sister says, I want your opinion,
Sure.
you go, okay. First, though, what do you think? If you did know the answer, what would it be?
Right.
Right? Like, and this is for everyone, because what we're really saying when we HFCs, we have a tendency to manage the crap out of the people in our lives. And I gotta say, management isn't love. It really isn't. Even if we think we're being driven by love, our husbands don't want to be managed. Our grown children don't want to be managed. And even our minor children want a certain amount of respect. Listen to them. Ask a question and then be quiet.
Right.
Huh. Right. Well, I think about that differently. You can have a differing opinion. But what I find is that the desire, when you fall into this category of being a high-functioning codependent, it's like we're really driven by our fear, which is different than being driven by love, which is different than being driven by choice. Like, think about your friends, the ones that you go to, who can just listen to you.
Right.
Who will be like, I don't know the answer, but I'm in the foxhole with you while you're in pain. And I'm not trying to bypass your pain. I'm not being like a silver lining friggin' detective to be like, but everything happens for a reason. Or maybe, which is so.
Right.
When you're on the receiving end, you're like, oh, please, no. Don't tell me all the reasons I should be grateful for this terrible thing happening in my life.
Right.
Anyway, so what I've found is that as I became less and less of a high-functioning codependent, my relationships got better and better, and my stress became so much lower when I started getting so clear about what was my side of the street. And then I just started teaching this to my clients because I didn't even know. I didn't even know there was a choice. I thought the way I was the only way I could be if I were to be a loving mother, partner, sister, friend, daughter,
Right. And so, one thing that I'm really hearing from you is this idea of management, right? Of managing all the things going on in our lives or, all of the people in our lives, like this idea of management. And so, for so many of us, we do that professionally in our work, right? In our work environments, we have to manage our patients and our schedule and, the this and the that, right? And so, and management is given a lot of praise, right? It's something that this culture, this Western culture really rewards, right? So it can actually be hard to see it differently in a professional versus a personal setting and understand that. I mean, because, management in a professional setting that's how you achieve, you go up the
Of course.
success ladder, right? And so as you're saying this, I'm like, yeah, management in a work relationship is actually a good thing. But so I think it can actually be very difficult to see how it's different and how you might fit into that. So how does it show up differently, or how do you even tease that apart?
It's actually such a great question, because when I look at who are the people in my crew, right? Like my demographic, it really is you. It really is the therapist, the doctors, the ER nurse, the triage nurses. It's like all the people, the end of life people, the people who are really doing the hard work out there in the world and being of service, and how so many of them come in and are reading books and doing my courses because they're so burnt out.
Sure.
And they're like, I don't know how to turn it off. So part of it is we start to look at, and I always have in my courses and in my therapy clients, I will start with doing a resentment inventory, because this will bring us to the places where we're sort of over-functioning in our personal lives, because most people don't appreciate our over-functioning. So we will either be resentful that they're not doing the thing, their life is still a basket case, even though you're like, aha, I gave you all the answers, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
So we're mad about that, let's say, or we are overextending ourselves. They are taking us up on it, and we are mad. And we're like, that, why are they doing that? So, I mean, there's many, many reasons why we have resentment, but I feel like your resentment inventory can act as a GPS to go, okay, so where am I feeling overly responsible or being overly controlling in my relationships? Because a lot of times that's where resentment is, or where do I need better boundaries? Because another thing that's interesting is that HFCs have a tendency, we don't even realize it, but we can be like the worst boundary tramplers, where you may not think that's what you're doing, because you're like, but I'm doing it out of love, but they need help, so I'm helping them. But a lot of times we're doing things that people aren't asking us to do.
Right.
People don't appreciate it. They're like, stop smothering me. I don't, I want to do it myself, especially with like teenage kids, where if you're trying to do too much, they're like, dude, I'm trying to individuate. Please stop,
Yeah. Yeah. But what about in a work setting? And so I can see it very clearly for somebody who's in the helping profession. I'm totally getting that, right? We extend what we do in a professional, aspect to every aspect of our lives, because that's our nature, right? In a way. But what about someone who's working in corporate America, let's say, right? And part of managing people is helping them, right? And sort of, all these books about great leaders and, the servant leader and all of these terms that are out there is about being dialed into the people who work for you or on your team, understanding what's going on in their lives, right? And sort of helping them bring together, personal and work lives. And it can get messy. It's almost like they become family members in a way, because you can spend a lot of time with them.
Yep.
So how do you start to figure out the difference there?
Well, part of it is, I feel like being a good leader, I don't think it means being heavily involved in the personal lives of the people who work for you. I don't. And I actually think that from a therapeutic point of view, this is very problematic, because everyone starts recreating their family of origin. It's almost like the longest family vacation you never wanted to go on. Like, it just never friggin' ends. You're like, why is there always like a bully who was like my sister? Why is there always,
Yeah.
So I think the boundaries are, yes, good leadership means your boss knows your partner's name, knows that you have 4 kids or 3 kids or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to go over that line. Again, you could also use a resentment inventory, because if you're over-functioning at work, let's say, if you're doing more for a subordinate than you should be, because you should not be doing their job.
Of course.
This is it. Their job is, here's black and white.
Yep.
Here are their tasks.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing their tasks, you are not doing them a favor. It's the same way if we are infantilizing children or minors, a 12-year-old. I was talking to some guy had asked me a question online, and he's like, I don't know what to do. This is during the pandemic. And he's like, I'm trying to have meetings, and then my 11-year-old is knocking on, wants lunch, wants me to make lunch at 12. And I was like, first of all, start with the fact that an 11-year-old can make their own friggin' lunch unless they're making a souffle. But I mean, an 11-year-old can make a sandwich. You don't even have to cook. Secondly, how about a little proactive thinking? Like, how about the night before, 11-year-old, you and me,
make lunch.
What are we having for lunch tomorrow? We'll make it now.
Right.
Like, there's a million answers to that.
Yeah.
But there's something sort of funny about needing to be, I'm not even sure what the deal was, but the infantilization, it's the same thing as centering other people's problems on ourselves when we want to provide every answer. When we overfunction for others, we're doing the same thing. I'm centering myself, and how I came to this whole thing about centering, and this story is in the book too, but I'll just briefly share it. One of my sisters I have 3 sisters. One of my sisters was in a bad situation, always kind of in not good relationships. But anyway, she was in a really bad situation, living in the woods in a house without running water and no electricity, with a guy who was a crackhead who was abusive, and she was an alcoholic. So this was like a very horrible situation that I could not stop trying to fix. Like, I just was like, how am I leaving her in the woods? Like, I have to do something. Crying, talking to my therapist, bawling my face off week after week, being like, and then finally I was like, what am I going to do? Bev, what am I going to do? And she was like, Terri, what makes you think you know what your sister needs to learn in this lifetime? I was like, oh my God, I don't know, but I think we could all agree she doesn't need to do it in the woods with a crackhead who's abusive. And she was like, I literally cannot agree because I don't know.
Right.
But do you know what's happening for you? And I was like, besides me losing my mind, no. And she's like, Terri, you've worked for 10 years or more to like create a pretty like a life filled with harmony. You're in a good relationship. You've got these, kids that you've inherited that you're doing your thing. Your sister's train wreck of a life is really fucking with your pace. And you just want her to get it together so that your pain can end.
Exactly.
And I was like,
damn, you just hit it on the head. Yep.
I mean, it was so obvious and yet shocking. Because if you had said to me, what is your motivation for wanting to help Jenna? I'd be like, she doesn't deserve that, blah, blah, blah. But when she said it that way, I realized I want peace. And so I was like, so what do I do? She's like, well, it's not your situation to control, but you can create boundaries for yourself. And so I did. And I stepped back and I told my sister, listen, you telling me all the terrible things this idiot does to you, I can't even deal with it. So while you're still there, I really have to limit my contact, which was so hard. And you would think that would feel good, but of course it did not feel good, but I still did it. And I said, and when and if you want to get out of there, please let me be your first call. Like, I'm still the one. And 9 months later, maybe we talked twice over that period of time. Yeah. And 9 months later, she called. And she was like, hello, I'm ready. I was like, I'm getting in my car. And, she got to be. So the end of that story was, instead of me being the hero of Jenna's story, she got to be the hero of her own story. And it wouldn't have stuck anyway if it had been me. But she got to feel good about herself. She got into recovery. She went back to school. She built her life herself. And yes, I helped in ways that I could. That made sense. But it wasn't about me. And when we insert ourselves, it really does become about me. And I realized how much I had done that in my life, this over responsibility for other people's situations, and how we can find the balance of being present and being loving and respecting people's right to be sovereign, you know?
Right. I think there's something you just said, and it's about the discomfort that you were feeling. I think that is such a key point, because what I'm hearing, what's coming up for me as you're saying that, is that when we are trying to fix everyone else's problems, right? When we are centering ourselves, it's because we don't want to deal with the discomfort that we are feeling for that person.
Yes.
Because we're so attached to what they're doing and the outcome, we take it on and we're like, God, oh my gosh, how can they feel? I don't want them to feel that way. And even in a work situation, right? If it's someone that you're working with, you're so overly involved. You're like, oh my gosh, that poor person. I don't want to, Sally, I don't want her to feel that way. She's got such a rough life. Maybe I should lighten up on all the stuff that she's supposed to do, whatever it is, right?
Yes. And what I say, and I tell you in the book that this is a way that you can know that you're being codependent, is when you say, I don't want them to think, or I don't want them to feel.
Yes. Yeah.
And the moment that comes out of your mouth, right, you need to go, oh, what they think and what they feel is their side of the street.
Right.
What I think, what I feel is my side of the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That is powerful. That is exactly, that is so, so important. And, I'm thinking about this is that, from an Ayurvedic standpoint, right, it's all about the doshas and we have this nature versus nurture. We're born with a certain nature. And that word nature has come up a few times in our conversation already. And so my question is that, are there certain, quote, types of people that you think are more susceptible to being in a high functioning codependency sort of pattern? Would you say that?
Yes, okay. I would say that I think women in particular are raised and praised to be self-abandoning codependents. Like, fact.
Sure,
fact,
sure.
Right? It's like the more self-sacrificing, the better.
Right.
So I feel like we are primed and we are indoctrinated. And that is a pattern into the cult of nice. Be perceived as nice, be nice. Being seen as nice is way more important than actually being nice. It's really the perception, right? We want people to think we're nice. And I feel like if we put the same amount of energy into teaching girls how to be self-expressed, how to create boundaries, how to assert themselves, as we did beating it into them that being nice is the most important thing in the world, we would have way more empowered daughters. But the type of person is one who's been indoctrinated into, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, which is pretty much all of us because we all have the same parents. So we learn, not to mention empaths, people who are highly sensitive, right? Because we're already dialed into the feeling states of others. Sure. Right. Listen, I didn't want to be an empath. I didn't choose that. Right. That is how I'm drawn. That is my nature. And so many women that I know, we just feel what other people are feeling. I know you're an empath and I know you're a highly sensitive person and I don't even need to know it to know it. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And so, what I'm hearing actually is that it's actually something that's related to all of the three dosha types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, because there are parts of each of those personality types that would be very much right in that high functioning codependency. So it's either the codependency part or the high functioning, right? So, Pittas are all high functioning. They're fire, fire, fire. Yep, me. We have a lot of that in us. And so we want to control everything that's going on around us in our environment, in our relationships, and the people, right?
Yes, yes. And what you're going to see with the other doshas is that the high functioning piece is the thread throughout high functioning codependence, but the way we express it is different. You might be more introverted. Maybe you're just the person at work that everybody knows they can count on. You do so much. You're like the sweep up person, but you do it quietly.
Yep.
You don't throw yourself a parade. You don't make an announcement about it. Right. Exactly. So I do think that, yes, the high functioning piece is the piece that's throughout. The way it expresses, it's not all being pitta and being an extrovert, right? So my HFC-ness comes out in a more, I see you on the train platform, I'm going to take you home, bossy kind of way, where someone who is less fiery
Yep.
would, maybe that's not how it would be expressed for them. They may not interact with the world in that same way. That is more of an extroverted quality of an HFC, but they're still the same things that are negatively impacting a pitta is negatively impacting a kapha, is negatively, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the way it's the way it's coming out from their nature is different, but the result is the same, is what you're saying, right? Because for the vata, they're highly anxious. For someone who's more vata, they're highly anxious and they want, to make sure people like them. There's that people pleasing piece. For pittas, it's all about the control, the extrovertedness. For kaphas, it's more about, I am the dependable person. I always get shit done for other people.
Yes.
I'm the person everyone can count on, right? 3 different motivations, same result. So fascinating that we're all driven a little differently to get there, but we all get there to this high functioning codependency pattern, right?
Yes. So let's talk about what we can do. Like what can you do? If anyone watching this and listening is like, okay, great, I'm identified. The problem is me. Now what do I do?
Yeah. Before you say that, because what I do want to say is that this is so important for our health, right? Because of the amount of stress that it causes, the internal conflict it causes, having that big backpack of, responsibility to figure everything out for everybody in our lives, it causes a lot of emotional and mental distress, and it affects our mental health, which is completely, connected to all aspects of health from an Ayurvedic standpoint. And also we know from a Western standpoint, when it comes to longevity, right? The state of our relationships affects our ability to live longer, happier lives, not just a longer lifespan, but a longer health span, right? So I think it's so important to really understand how something like this also affects how long we live and how we live and the quality of our life, right? In the long run, not just now, but in the long run too. So yes, please, let's go into what do we do when we've identified it like, yes, I'm the problem. This is me.
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a resentment inventory, because that'll help to see where we might need to tweak some relationships. So that's one thing. Then I want you to adopt this strategy where when someone in your life is going to do something and you don't think it's a good idea, or you think they should do it differently, because a lot of the times the things that we're trying to control, they're not even important. They're like, oh, I think I'm going to go up 8th Avenue. And you're like, it'd be faster to go up 10th and go over at 42nd. Like we're just controlling shit that doesn't matter. We're trying to. And instead of that, I put this in the book. This is a strategy from Mel Robbins, where you want to say to yourself, let them go up 8th Avenue. Let them fly out of LAX and not Bob Hope. Let them, whatever the thing is, that there's a part of you that wants to hook into convincing, changing their mind, jumping in there, realizing it's not yours to do, and just give yourself permission. So what happens to the central nervous system when we go from thinking, oh, they're going to go the wrong way, right? That creates constriction. When you say the words, let them, there's sort of this like, yeah. And it's ironic, right? Because here's the reality. We're not actually letting anything. But what we're cueing ourselves, right? We're cueing ourselves that it's not for us to determine. So I think that's one of and that leads us to the next thing to really integrate into your life. There's 2 concepts and 2 sets of actions that you can take that will make a difference if you are a burnt out, exhausted, over-functioning, high-functioning codependent. Is get really understanding the power of allowing other people to add value to your life, allowing other people to do what they're going to do, but also allowing people to help you, asking for the help you need, because this is another notorious thing that we are bad at as HFCs, is we don't want to owe anybody crap. We don't want to ask for anything to be done for us. We feel terrible. We feel like we have to make it up to someone if they do something nice for us, even though we do nice shit for people all day long, right? It's just so wild. So allowing people to add value to your life, allowing people to do their jobs. If you're getting in a taxi and the guy's like, let me put your suitcase in the back, let him. Instead of, I would always be like, oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to get out. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like, why? Let your partner do things for you. Stop psychoanalyzing and needing it all to be done perfectly.
Right.
Say yes and allow. So that's one thought. The other is surrendering, changing your relationship to what it means to surrender. Because surrendering is going with the flow, right? It's like when you feel like you're swimming upstream, just flip over and float. That is surrendering, where we have to surrender to what is, right? It's not easy sometimes. Like I was in denial of my sister's situation. It required me to surrender to what was the reality. She was choosing to stay because she was an addict, because of whatever was happening. And when I surrendered to that, then I could think about, then what is my action for me that I can do? And it was draw a boundary. But so much of the time we are, as highly capable people, we are living in the, but it could be different, but I could do something. We're living in the non-reality of like, if they would just do this though, it would be different. And the thing is, we must get to the place of surrendering to what is, because then we can actually problem solve from a healthy place, but we have to surrender to what is. And the last thing I want to say is this concept of it's not really self-care, right? It's this, I fold in self-care into it, but it's self-consideration. Everything you're doing in your life, you have to think about it. Like we've got to get off this reactionary automatic pilot of just acting, and we're reacting is what we're doing when we're immediately giving advice, when we're immediately whatever. So we want to move into this self-consideration where it's like, instead of always being like, I'm fine, because here's another thing, Avanti, and I know this is true for you too. I mean, now it depends. We both have had our own health crises in our lives.
Yep.
So let's just say, not when you're going through a health crisis, but let's say before that. How often were people checking on you? Right? Like everyone knows you're fine. Everyone knows I'm fine because I'm always fucking fine. Because that is an HFC thing where I'm checking on all the people. You're checking on all the people. The same way you have a stadium full of data in your mind about the people in your life. You know who doesn't eat. You know everyone. You know who is gluten-free, who doesn't like this person, who doesn't drink wine, who who had food poisoning, we know all the things. And so much of the time we don't expect that back. We don't even want that back. It's like, and I feel like that self-consideration means that we allow others to care for us the way that we care for them. We say no to things if we're too tired to do them. We respect our own bandwidth limitations. We give ourselves permission to just rest for a day, take a nap on a Saturday afternoon. We stop living by the productivity rule of like feeling like we always have to be doing something or getting something done. Right. And really embracing, dialing into the wisdom of your body. Right. What do I need right now? And then giving yourself whatever that is. That's self-consideration, which is different than self-care. Because I feel like as an HFC, self-consideration really can be the last on your list, and it really needs to be first. What you think, what you want, right? How you feel about stuff. That has to be important, and it has to be to you. What you want, what you think, and what you feel has to be the most important, more important than anybody else.
Yeah, no, and so much of what you're saying is hitting me in such a deep part, because this is, all of these things are a huge realization that I had when I first got that diagnosis a year and a half ago, is I had a real moment on my knees of realizing like, this shit wasn't going to fly anymore, of me trying to do everything by myself, for myself, not asking for help, being the strong one, et cetera, et cetera. I knew that one of the lessons I needed to learn was to allow other people to help me, and to stop being that high functioning person for everybody else, and allow, like you said, right? I think that is such a big part of this mental health connection to longevity and illness and health, right? It's all connected, because when we take that stress on of fixing everything in the world, it eats away at our peace, but it also turns all of those longevity switches off. The things that I've written about in my book, the things that are being studied, right? We know that it all has an effect. And so I think that beyond even making your life better in this moment, which I know all of us want to do, you also have to start to think about, how is this affecting my long-term health, right? And how I'm going to function, and the relationships that I'm going to have. It affects everything. It's not just right now, it's for the long haul too, even though now is important too. But I think that so much of what you said is so relevant to so many of us who are having aches and pains, symptoms, diagnoses, and we don't even realize the piece that this is in our puzzle of our health and what's happening to us.
Yep. And the ripple effect of all of this stress and constriction and this bidding for control, how it is so damaging to our health, our physical health and physiological way, and how much burnout I see in my practice because of that. And so there's a cycle where, as HFCs, we'll care too much about everything and everyone. So too many F's, as I like to say. I won't actually say it, but too many F's about all the things.
Yep.
And then you hit a wall, and it's like the pendulum swings all the way over, and you're like, and I'm done, and don't care, and good, leave them. I don't even care what happens. Right. Like, we hit that. Right. So obviously, when we're really in recovery from being a high functioning codependent, we find our way to the middle, where we go, I'm clear about what is my responsibility. I'm clear about what is your responsibility. I allow you to struggle, even if I love you. I'm here. That is me loving you, is respecting that the choice to be made is yours, and that it's not for me to control. It's not for me to make you not make mistakes. It's for me to be with you, even if you are making a mistake. Yes, you can give the person your opinion, but realizing, really respecting other people's autonomy, because it really negatively impacts our relationships when we don't,
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's probably the most important piece of what we're talking about, is that relationships are so key to our health, the state of our relationships. That's one of the things I always tell people: look at your relationships and how they might be contributing either to your health or to your illness. And we know that there's an epidemic of loneliness. And so you want to, have those strong relationships. And I think that this behavior pattern of high functioning codependency actually prevents us from having those relationships, those deep, intimate relationships, because people are like, I don't want to be around her. She's bossy. She's trying to fix my life. I don't need that. Right?
Yep. Yeah. It does not feel good to be managed. I always say this, management is not love. It's control.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I feel like this is a good place for us to end our conversation. We could keep talking because this is such fascinating stuff. I love it. It's brilliant. And I think that, this idea of telling people it's actually high functioning, I think this is revolutionary, because I do think, and Terri, you already know this, you've written a whole book on it. It's going to help so many people, because they're going to say, oh, I see myself. She's holding up a mirror. I understand that's me. And so, obviously my next book is called The Longevity Formula. Last question I want to ask you is that, in your experience, what do you see as the essential formula for longevity, where our health span equals our lifespan? What would you say?
I mean, maybe because I'm a therapist, But I think it's what we were talking about. I really think, besides the basic stuff of I work out, I drink water, I try to eat organic, like I do all the obvious things that we know how to do, but it's really the quality of my personal and professional relationships that inspires me to want to live a long life. It's like a lot of people live a long life, but if your relationships are toxic or if you're alone, what good is that? What is good for me is a long life with my husband. I have 7 grandchildren. I have 3 sons. I've got daughters-in-law. I've got a house full of people and vacations to be together. And I have the same friends since Nixon was in office. Like I am a relationship girl. And that, the quality of those relationships, I will always put the work in to have healthy relationships, because I think that they dictate the quality of my life. And having a high quality of life makes me want it to be long, right?
Yeah. Terri, thank you so much for this time. I am so excited for you and your book launch. We will put all of the things in the show notes for everyone listening. Don't worry, there'll be links to her book, her courses, all of the stuff that she's doing.
Great.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I loved being with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.